Welcome to Talking Out Cloud, the podcast where we discuss the latest developments in IT and cloud. And in today's episode, disaster recovery, facts, myths, and strategies. And today I have with me Gert-Jan. Welcome.
Hey, welcome, Ashley.
How are you?
Yeah, fine. And how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah?
This is like our third episode together.
Yeah.
I think we need no introductions.
No.
No, but we work at Intercept.
Yes.
We build, implement, design infrastructures.
Work with cool stuff.
Yeah, we work with the cool stuff on Microsoft Azure.
Yes.
And today, I think a topic that is long overlooked or not discussed in boardrooms, disaster recovery.
I think so.
And so disaster recovery in general, I think there's some misconceptions like DR.
Yeah.
It's not backup. Backup is not DR. Different things.
No.
Yeah. It's I think that's the challenge. When we engage with customers, they talk about I want DR, but really what they want is backup. And I think then the discussion boils down to what have you discussed with your end customers? So we work with software companies. What do they promise their customers? RPO, RTO, very complex.
Yeah.
Let's not worry about that. But
the first question is maybe what you are going to get from the customers. I want my data back. When you're talking about backup, but where do you want to store the data? Do you want to have an environment next to the one you already have in another region to restore your data? And then you are going to talk about DR and not backup, a combination of that. So that's the important question to ask for a customer, I think.
Yeah, and I think, I want my data back. And I think it's, there's different scenarios. There's the, oopsie, I want my data back and, oh no, I just woke up, my Azure subscription is empty scenario. That's like the DR thing, right?
That's the DR thing.
And then you have the question, or the customer comes to us and goes, I want backup. And I ask them, so what retention do you want?
Yes.
Does it need to be immutable? Can it be stored in which region?
Yeah.
And I think 90% of the time the answer is, I don't know, you tell me.
Yeah. Or they use the standard policy for backup purposes for a file restore. That's okay. You can use a different or standard policy for file restore. But for example, if you have an SQL database or something similar, then you want to store that in with different technologies, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, you mean like the point in time restore?
Point in time. Do you want to have an incremental or a differential backup? That sort of stuff. And it all depends. Also, the question is mainly what I always ask to a customer is, when do you want to run your production again?
Yeah.
And then if you have to talk with the customer, the customer will eventually say, okay, I find it more important to stop my production and to get my backup back in a later point. And then you have the combination of DR and backup when you want to control that.
Yeah, and then there's the question, when is it backup and when is it DR? And I found a really nice analogy which states backup is like taking snapshots of your family photos.
Yeah.
DR is like having a plan if your house burns down, where to go, how to get replacements, and how quickly.
That's a good one.
So you could say that you can do backup without DR because it's also a convenient thing, right? The customer deletes a table in the database and you want to restore that. So you can do backup without DR, but you cannot do DR without backup.
You can. That's a good. I think that suits the. Yeah, I think that is a suitable explanation.
Yeah.
You can always start a new workload in another region using DR, but if the data is not there, you will lose business, I think.
Yeah, you will have your product ready to go somewhere in a different region, but not your customer data. So
exactly,
you kind of need to back up.
Yeah.
And then I also think there's like different points where this originates from. So backup is usually comes from our common sense. Hey, we've got data, so we need to back it up. That's why we have these default policies in place, like Azure SQL, and it's got the point in time restore and the 30 days, top of my head, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And that's usually from a convenience point of view. Like my customer has a question, oopsie, I need to restore it, or what if data is gone? And then DR is more a, would you say, business continuity question?
I think so. I think I always ask myself the question: when do you start with your DR planning? I think it's the same with security. I think, but for DR, people always say, "Oh, we built the environment and we do the DR after building the environment and think about DR." But I think it's important to think about it in the first step. Let's say you deploy your stuff in West Europe and you do it with EAC. How cool will it be that you can create your EAC that it's deployable in West Europe, but also can deploy it in North Europe. You can do it active. You can do it active passive. You can deploy the code using the same EAC in a different region. So with reusable code. So I think if you are talking about disaster recovery, do that in the first stage.
Should be part of your initial design.
Of your initial design. And yes, you can always tweak it later on. But I think it's very important.
Yeah, because most often it's something done after the fact. Like we've deployed everything, and then a couple of months in, the customer goes, or someone will go, "All right, so what is our DR strategy?"
Yeah,
I'm like, well, and I think that's the beauty of infrastructure as code, right? So you don't need to have a active or hot kind of configuration and spend additional money. You can deploy it in time
whenever you need it.
Yeah, so that's one motivation to use infrastructure as code, right?
Yeah, I think so. So in the initial way, when you deploy your initial environment, you always know how long it will take when you deploy it with EAC. So you can take it also in your in your disaster recovery plan, how long it will take to deploy your extra second environment in the other region. Yeah. So you can take that to a point in your plan, in your DR recovery time, I think, together with your backup.
Yeah, so and I think the backup is usually the thing that really takes time, restoring the backup. Yeah. Because even with DR, so let's say you're not doing infrastructure as code, if you're doing ClickOps, please don't, but let's say someone's doing ClickOps, and even from the start, when you start deploying the environment, you need to start deploying your DR infrastructure. And you can turn it off and save costs. But it needs, and then with every change, I think that's part of your change management process, really. Mm-hmm. With every change you do, ensure that it's part of your DR as well.
Exactly. Edit it also in your infrastructure as code or in your documentation, what you are changing in your primary region. And of course, there are also options to replicate stuff to the other region as well. So you need to take care of, if we are talking about backup, you can also have some configuration settings that you can restore content to another region as well. So it's good when you come back to the point, do the design, in the design phase, think about DR and think about backup, think about those settings, so what you are going to use. I think that's very important, and it cannot be overlooked, if you know what I mean.
No. And also probably think about the why. Why do you want backup? Why do you want DR? I mean, DR, obviously it's your business, your lifeline.
Yes,
it's where you make your money. So you need to have a DR strategy. You need to have a DR scenario that's been tested as well.
Yeah.
But also backup. Why do you do the backup? Is the backup because the customer occasionally deletes something? Is it just for your DR scenario? Or are you also at risk of ransomware or cyber attacks? Because then you also need to look at things like immutable storage configuration.
Yeah. Some compliance certification will say you need some kind of backup. Your backup is always in Azure. Your backup is always encrypted, but maybe you want to use your own keys for example, in your own, so that you have control about your own data.
Or use immutable storage.
Immutable storage.
Copy data to immutable storage to ensure that if something is ransomware, you also have your copy of the immutable storage.
Exactly. And that's something also in the begin phase you need to think about. So not at the end, because you can change settings, but if you change the settings wrong, your backup will be useless after that. So it's good to think about that in the main phase. Yeah.
And I think when it comes to DR, I have these discussions with customers as well. So when we get the question, how do we do DR? Then we go, we've got infrastructure as code, we've got backup, we can restore stuff. But then there's also the application that still needs to run, right?
Yeah.
It still needs to, you have a pipeline or you have a CI/CD and you deploy new infrastructure. It needs to connect to the infrastructure.
Yeah.
The application needs to deploy. Customers need to be deployed.
Definitely. Yeah.
There's way more to it than just, just for everyone listening, just having infrastructure as code and a backup does not ensure you have a good disaster recovery strategy.
You need to think about networking. You need to think about maybe some regional service. Let's say you use an Azure firewall, something like that. You need to take care about your IP planning. So that are all the things that coexist or need to be in the chain of disaster recovery. Yeah.
And then there's the point of testing, right?
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this for a while. So you've got your infrastructure as code. You can test that part of the DR like every week. You can automate it.
Yep.
You do pipeline. Does it deploy? Yes. Successful. Nice.
Yeah.
Then can you restore a database? You can also automate that, right? And then, from an RPO and RTO perspective, and what do you sell your customers in an SLA? Maybe you want to test like the small, medium, and big databases to know how quickly do you restore.
Very important, very important. I think you can always trust your backup when you have tested it, but it also counts for disaster recovery. So when creating pipelines, when creating infrastructure as code, you can automate a lot of stuff. But keep in mind that you always think about that when you do the restore test. You don't want to conflict or inflict damage to your production environment. The same naming, same IP plans, or that you have appearing not set up correctly. But you can automate it, and you can also clean it up automatically if you want. So, but the main thing is, like you said, test your backup, test your DR if you set it in place. But because you don't want to test it in case of emergency, because then you will probably will be disappointed if it's not being correctly configured.
Exactly. And I think that's also interesting when it comes to DR testing. Often we get the question, can we do a DR test? And they want the end-to-end test from beginning to the end. But you can, throughout the year, you can do multiple tests. You can do your infrastructure every month. You can do backup restore every month. In general, if you sell your customer an SLA of, we can restore your data within 4 hours.
Yeah.
But then the customer database grows over time and the size increases in 2 years' time. Can you still promise that? So you need to keep testing that as well, the business side of things.
Yes, definitely. It grows with you, I guess. It grows. Your plan will evolve based on your company growth, your data grow, your resources are growing. So, because I think an environment will always evolve and grow further. So keep that in mind. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so you've got your business continuity plan, and then you've got crisis management, and then you have, the DR, and then is it all been tested, and is it tested every year? And back to my point, you can do some parts every week, every month, but then once a year, you probably want to do like the end-to-end one with the customer, with the end customer.
Definitely.
Deploy everything, deploy the application, deploy the code, restore the data, and then have a customer test. Hey, does it work? I think that's the way to go about DR. You have different pieces of your DR strategy, which you can test individually. Yeah. And then once a year, you want to do the big one.
Exactly.
And then something that you said recently, which keeps coming back in my head. Do you need everything automated when it comes to DR? It
will make your life easier, I think. Definitely.
But is it worth the money to automate everything in case of emergency? When you wake up, the Azure subscription is empty, your tenant is empty.
Yeah.
You've automated 90%. That last 10%, that can be ClickUps. That's fine. It's crisis.
If in case of crisis, you will always be flexible. You also need to be flexible, I guess. So then it's good to click. But it's also good to mention, that's also the coolest way of the public cloud. You're flexible to do both ways if you want. So if you wanted to do using ClickUps, it's also fine. Mm-hmm. So if you cannot automate it is not the end of the world. You can do both.
Yeah, and I think from what I've seen from most DR scenarios, I mean, 80% is automated. There's always some manual steps because you've got your base layer of infrastructure, you've got the infrastructure code that's being deployed, and you've got the data being restored, and you've got the application that needs to be deployed, which also involves usually the customer with their pipelines, and they need to be connected. So usually connecting the pipelines to an environment is the manual step. You need to do authorization. I mean, that is fine, but that's like that's what I mean with the end-to-end DR test. That's like people clicking, automated deployments, everyone in the same room. Let's test this whole thing.
Exactly. You need to do it. You need to collaborate with that. You have the infrastructure, and you have the software, and you have the data. And I think we as a company we can also fulfill the most part. But you have some dependencies for your content.
Yeah, and then something I came across in a DR scenario recently, or DR testing, and this is when the ClickOps thing happens. Azure policy, for example.
Oh yeah.
Let's say we deploy to West Europe.
Yeah.
And then we have a policy. We can only deploy in West Europe.
Yeah, you need to lose that.
And then we have a DR scenario, and I deploy my policies. Or it's in the same, or I've got my policies using management groups.
Yeah.
We've got a new subscription. I'm going to deploy to, I don't know, East US.
Everything
fails because I've had an Azure policy. So I think in a DR or in a crisis scenario, what is more important, following all the compliance that you had in place, compliance and security, or is it getting stuff up and running again? That's also an interesting discussion, right?
It's a really good discussion. I think the last one, in case of emergency, and you see that nothing is, that you're losing business, you will be flexible about that. But it's a good. The Azure policy is also a good point that you make, because you can I think if you're talking about DR, you always also talk about existing environment and how your Azure policies are being placed. So. It's good to also think about the dependencies when implementing in the DR strategy, I think. So, but in the case of emergency, you do the best as you can.
In case of emergency, it's more important to get stuff up and running than security and compliance and all of that. So we could sacrifice an application gateway with web application firewall in favor of getting stuff up and running, because we don't want to lose business. Yeah,
that will be my advice. And you can do it then on a later stage. You can implement all those extra bits and pieces to fit in the new environment. So,
Well, I think that's also when it comes down to RPO and RTO, right? Where one is like, can we get stuff up and running as fast as possible? And where the other one is going back to the original scenario.
Phase, restore your data. If I was a company, I will be glad that my employees could log into a server or whatsoever to do their jobs, if you know what I mean. And the WAF is also important, but is not a part of. I think it's not part of your. That does not have to be part of your disaster recovery plan.
Yeah, and I think that's what companies need to realize, that when you have a DR scenario, it's crisis. The most important thing is getting things up and running, one way or the other. If you have good, resilient DR strategies that you've tested before with infrastructure as code and automated restores, then that will help a lot.
Yep.
But then I also got a question from a customer like 2 years ago, and they said, "So what if, let's say I'm a software company and I've got 200 end customers, and I've got 200 databases." Obviously, I cannot restore all of them at the same time.
No.
Which one will I restore first?
That's a good question. How did you respond then?
When they asked me,
I
said whichever customer is bringing me the most business.
That's a good
because it's business continuity.
That is business continuity.
I mean, that's an unpopular opinion. You can always do things in parallel, but what I've also found was, because then the discussion went, okay, so what if we restore everything at the same time across subscriptions or regions or whatever? I was thinking out loud there. I'm thinking, well, we also have capacity management and quota management if I'm going to do a DR.
But that's.
I need to select regions up front and ensure that I've got the quota, right?
That is really a good point. We missed that, to be honest, because that's also part of your disaster recovery plan. You need to, when the whole, let's say everybody in North Europe has a problem, and they need to fail over to North Europe.
And then we all have the same problem.
You have the same problem. So you can also take care about that in your disaster recovery plan to, let's say, do capacity reservations in the other region, that you have the compute resource already in place when needed. So, but that's a good point. Or use an active that you have already deployed stuff in the North Europe region. But it will cost you a little bit more money. So money is also a good. How much do you want to pay for a disaster recovery solution? How much is it worth for you?
How much do you want to pay for business continuity? Yeah, and I think if you do the active configuration, which works, but then what I see a lot is when customers do that or companies do that, they do. They've got full-blown configuration in one region and then a smaller setup in a different region.
Yeah.
But then, if the big region goes down, you still have the capacity issues on the other region because you never reserve the quota.
Exactly.
So, if you want that, if you want the absolute insurance, you always want to have 2 copies, right?
You have to, definitely.
But then boardroom conversation, a lot of money. We can take it's risk management.
Yeah, you will have probably your financial manager on the table and say, "Hey, why is the consumption so much?" And then you need to explain that, and then you have the discussion about how much will it cost you for your business continuity. Yeah. So there are good discussions, to be honest, but you need to have them, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could say that, you've got the hot configuration, everything running 2 copies, maximum amount of money that you're going to spend. You've got the hot warm, where it's turned off, but ready to go.
Ready to go, yeah.
But then ready to go means deallocated compute, usually.
Yeah. And
if you start it up, do you have the capacity?
That's
you need the reservations?
Deallocate is the same as deploying a new machine because you will give it away to Microsoft. And when you will start it, then you will ask, okay, can I start my some hardware? So
and then maybe it also comes down to risk assessment again.
Yeah.
Do you need all the workloads? Let's say back to the question: what are my biggest customers? Who am I going to restore first? Do they need all the workloads, or can I even spread customers across different regions? Or
it's a really good question. Do you maybe you can also think about a multi-cloud, maybe some Azure local stuff for your disaster recovery. There are all opportunities you can use.
Which could be a good investment doing it with Azure local, obviously. Yeah. But I think a lot of these things we usually do the technical bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But the conversation is like way before that. Which customers do I restore? What do they require? How much money am I willing to spend?
And the last one is what I see in reality. We all want disaster recovery, but if it costs a lot of money, then people say, "Oh, I want a small version of it."
But then what's the small version? And that's, we do infrastructure as code, and we always tell customers we do that, and then ask why. Well, because we can we can copy different environments. You've got prod, you want dev or acceptance, we can deploy it.
Yeah.
You have a problem, we've got your DR scenario for infrastructure ready to go because we do infrastructure as code.
Exactly.
That's also why we also keep telling customers stop clicking in the portal, and if you do it, tell us what you clicked, because then we can retrofit it.
Exactly. Use infrastructure as code. That's the main part, I think, what makes your life easy with disaster recovery. Definitely.
And just use things like Azure Policy to by default configure all the resources that support backup to do that. So backup on storage accounts, backup on Azure files, or
and it's good to mention that you also can use some more PaaS service that has regional functions that is not bound to a specific region, if you know what I mean. So if you use a regional service like an Azure front door or something like that, you can say, hey, West Europe is now failing, but I have my infrastructure as code in North Europe, but I can still use the same front door.
Same endpoints,
Same endpoints.
Because that's a global resource.
That's a global
resource. Like also like Azure DNS and
Traffic
Manager. Well, I think the part of front door that does that is the Traffic Manager part.
Yeah.
So that's also a reason why you want to pick those kind of resources over an application.
Actually, that in the design,
That's also an interesting one when it comes to DR configurations that impacts your infrastructure architecture. So in the car up here, we were talking about hub spoke networking, and do you always do hub to a spoke, or can you also interconnect spokes for whatever reason? So the hub is for the shared services, but you could say that if you do hub spoke, that also helps for your DR scenario, because then in your hub you want to have those global resources.
Exactly.
And whenever you deploy, it's DR time, and we deploy to a different region, we connect it to the hub, and the hub only has global resources.
Exactly.
So we don't need to set all that up. That's also an interesting take.
That's also, and of course you have some, the hub resources are maybe a little bit more you need to do some little bit more configuration in the internal content. But yeah, it's like you said, you can pair some resources together using a hub spoke. You can, that's true. That's a really good point you make. Yeah.
Nice. I think I hadn't thought of this before, but I think that plays a crucial part in
disaster
good DR.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So the recommendation is look at what you promise customers.
Yes.
And then look at tech.
Look at tech. And my point is, what I want to make, do it in the design phase, not at the end.
Not afterwards.
Not afterwards.
Because then you'll forget stuff.
You forget stuff.
But that's usually because you don't do infrastructure as code, right? Because then you just click things, and then 6 months in, you're like, oh, we're going to build a DR scenario.
Yeah.
And then we go, well, that works best with infrastructure as code.
Yeah.
But I don't know what I deployed, or I don't remember, I forgot stuff.
Exactly.
And then, so if you don't want DR to become insanely expensive, don't do that. Do it from the start.
Do it from the start. You have your file. You know what you are deploying with IAC. You don't have to look in the resource groups or what you like you said what you have deployed. So do that. Yeah.
And I think what we've seen is documentation is key. In case of emergency, when this happens and we all panic, you want to make sure that documentation is. Sometimes we ask ChatGPT, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Document this like a 5-year-old is going to do the restore, because when stuff happens, everything needs to be documented. Everything. You just want to do copy paste. That's the thing. You don't want to think.
No, and that's based on the testing you are going to do with the DRs, and then everybody, but also the customer knows what he needs to do in that kind of scenario, and then it will be fluid. And you don't want to do the first test in an actual emergency.
No. And then last but not least, before we end this show or this episode, discuss with your customer how you're deviating from your initial design and agreement. So for example, regulatory requirements. Let's say I'm a healthcare organization and I have a policy where I require my data to remain in the Netherlands, which is Azure West Europe in this case. There's a DR scenario.
Yeah.
We are the provider for that healthcare company. We know West Europe is not working. We can restore to a different region. That's the thing. I mean, when it comes to like firewalls or an app gateway, I mean, I think you're free to make that decision in case of emergency to ensure servers are up and running. But storing sensitive PII data in a different country than agreed with your customer, I think that's the one thing before you click deploy, you want to discuss with your customer, because they might as well say, if we do this, then the fines that we get are so big, let's not do a DR, let's wait for everything to come back up. Because that's also the decision, right?
Can also be
What's
a decision.
The expectation? Is it going to come back up tomorrow?
Yeah, it's a good. Yeah,
next week.
That is a good. That is a decision a company needs to make, I guess.
Yeah, boardroom decisions.
Now I'm now still thinking. Okay, maybe Azure Local, you can also do that to store your data at another machine, because you then have the data on the machine, and not somewhere in another part of the world. But but that's a decision that the company needs to make, also with the compliance they have set in place.
That'd be an interesting new business. Actually, let's say you purchase a bunch of hardware, you run Azure Local or somewhere in a data center in the Netherlands, and then you go, all right, so are you a company that needs the data to be stored in the Netherlands, and in case of emergency, it cannot go across borders?
Yeah.
We have your back. We've got Azure Local.
We can restore to your own machines.
I'm thinking of new business here.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Definitely.
Need to have some phone calls after this.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for joining, everyone. Thank you for
very much.
listening, and on to the next one.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wesley.